I was 19 years old on my wedding day. People often say a wedding is the happiest day of a woman's life. For many women, perhaps it is. For me, it was the day my heart broke and healed at the same time. In our Amish community, there was an old belief that many people rarely spoke about openly. Older women whispered it to daughters and granddaughters. Young brides heard it before marriage. The belief was simple. If a bride cried on her wedding night, people paid attention. Not because tears were forbidden, not because tears were shameful, but because tears often revealed what words could not. Fear, regret, loss, loneliness, or sometimes a heart that was struggling to leave one life behind and begin another. I never expected to become one of those brides, yet I cried harder than anyone could imagine. My name is Rebecca Fisher. I grew up on a small Amish farm in Ohio. My parents raised 7 children. I was the second oldest daughter. Our life was simple. The days began before sunrise. The smell of fresh bread filled our kitchen most mornings. My father worked the fields. My mother managed our home with quiet strength. I loved my family deeply, especially my father. He was not a man who spoke often, but when he did, people listened. He had a calmness about him that made everything feel safe. Whenever I faced a problem as a child, I always found my way back to him. If I fell from a horse, if I argued with my siblings, if I felt afraid, my father somehow made the world feel smaller and easier to understand. As I grew older, I knew marriage would eventually come. That was the natural path for most Amish women. Still, knowing something is coming and being ready for it are not the same thing. I met Daniel Miller when I was 18. He was kind, patient, hardworking, the kind of young man every parent hoped their daughter would marry. He never tried to impress people. He simply lived his life honestly. That was one reason I liked him. Our courtship lasted nearly a year. During that time, I became convinced that I loved him, and I truly did. That is what made everything so confusing, because love was never the problem. The problem was leaving. As the wedding approached, everyone talked about my future. My new home, my future children, my responsibilities as a wife, my life with Daniel. No one talked much about what I was losing. Perhaps because everyone expected it. Perhaps because every Amish daughter eventually leaves home. But each day brought me closer to a goodbye I was not ready to say. The week before my wedding, I found myself watching my family constantly. My mother hanging laundry, my brothers feeding animals, my sisters helping in the kitchen, my father sitting quietly after supper. Suddenly, every ordinary moment felt important. I began storing them inside my memory. I knew things would never be exactly the same again. One evening, I found my father repairing a broken wagon wheel. The sun was setting behind the barn. I stood beside him for several minutes. Neither of us spoke. Finally, he asked, "Something troubling you?" I nodded. He waited. That was another thing I loved about him. He never rushed people. "I am afraid." The words surprised even me. My father set down his tools. Of Daniel? No. Of marriage? I thought for a moment. Maybe. He smiled softly. "That is normal." But I shook my head. "It feels bigger than that." For a long time I struggled to explain what I was feeling. Finally I whispered the truth. "I do not want to leave home." The words immediately brought tears to my eyes. My father looked toward the fields, then back at me. His eyes seemed older than usual. "You are not leaving home." I frowned. "Yes, I am." "No." He gently touched my shoulder. "You are carrying home with you." At 19 years old, I did not fully understand what he meant. I wish I had. The wedding day arrived faster than I wanted. The church service lasted for hours. Family and friends filled the house. Everyone smiled. Everyone celebrated. Everyone congratulated us. I smiled too, but beneath every smile was a growing ache. Each hour moved me closer to goodbye. As evening approached, the celebrations slowly ended. People began leaving. The noise faded. The laughter disappeared. The house became quieter. That was when reality finally arrived. I was no longer simply a daughter. I was a wife. I remember hugging my mother. Neither of us wanted to let go. Then I hugged each of my siblings. The younger ones cried openly. That nearly broke me, but the hardest moment came last. My father stood near the doorway, waiting. calm as always, strong as always. I walked toward him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he wrapped his arms around me. I felt like a little girl again. Safe, protected, home. His voice was quiet. So this is goodbye. The words shattered something inside me. I began crying immediately. Not polite tears, not graceful tears, real tears, the kind that come from the deepest part of a person's heart. My father held me while I cried. No one interrupted. No one rushed me. No one told me to stop. Finally, he whispered something I will never forget. Rebecca, it is all right to love where you came from. I cried harder, because that was exactly what hurt. I loved where I came from. I loved my family. I loved my home. And suddenly I understood something no one had prepared me for. Marriage was not only about gaining a husband, it was also about letting go of part of your old life. That night, after arriving at Daniel's family home, I tried to compose myself. I truly did, but the tears would not stop. Minutes became hours. I sat on the edge of the bed crying quietly, then crying harder, then crying so hard I could barely breathe. Daniel sat beside me looking worried. The old Amish rule echoed in my mind, the one about brides who cry on their wedding night. People believed those tears always meant something important. I was beginning to realize they were right. What I did not know was that before morning arrived, Daniel would tell me something that would completely change how I understood those tears, and change our marriage forever. I sat on the edge of the bed with my hands folded tightly in my lap. The room was quiet. Outside, the night air moved gently through the trees. Inside, I could hear my own breathing, and my own crying. I felt embarrassed. A bride was supposed to be happy. A bride was supposed to be excited about her future. Instead, I looked like someone who had just lost everything. Daniel remained beside me. He did not seem angry. He did not seem disappointed, but he did seem concerned. After a while, he handed me a clean handkerchief. I accepted it without looking at him. Thank you. His voice was gentle. You do not have to thank me. I wiped my eyes. Then more tears came. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. The silence felt strangely comfortable. Finally, Daniel asked, "Do you want to tell me what is hurting so much?" I stared at the floor. I already know. He waited. I appreciated that. Many people rush to fill silence. Daniel never did. I miss home. The words sounded small compared to the feelings inside me. But they were true. He nodded. I know. That surprised me. I looked up. You do? Yes. His answer came quickly, almost too quickly. For the first time that evening, I stopped crying long enough to study his face. There was sadness in his eyes, not pity, sadness, as though he understood something deeply. Then he said something unexpected. The night my sister got married, she cried for hours. I blinked. Really? He nodded. Longer than you. A faint smile appeared on my face despite everything. That seems impossible. He laughed softly. I thought so too. For the first time all evening, the heaviness in the room eased, only slightly, but enough. Daniel leaned back in his chair. My mother told her something important that night. I listened carefully. She said grief and joy sometimes arrive together. I thought about those words, grief and joy, together. That was exactly how I felt. I loved Daniel. I wanted to build a life with him. Yet I also felt heartbroken about leaving my childhood behind. Both emotions were real. Neither canceled the other. Daniel continued. My sister thought her tears meant she was making a mistake. I looked at him. What did your mother say? He smiled. She said tears do not always mean something is wrong. I felt my chest tighten, because I had secretly been wondering the same thing. Maybe something was wrong with me. Maybe other brides were stronger. Maybe other brides let go more easily. Maybe I was failing at the very beginning of marriage. Daniel seemed to read my thoughts. You are not strange, Rebecca. The tears returned immediately. This time for a different reason. Sometimes the kindest words are the simplest. Not because they solve the problem, because they make you feel less alone inside it. Hours passed. Eventually my crying slowed. The room became quieter. I felt exhausted, emotionally, physically, mentally. Daniel stood and moved toward the small window. The moonlight touched the side of his face. Then he spoke again. There is something I have never told anyone. His voice sounded different, more serious. I sat up straighter. What is it? For several seconds he did not answer. Then he took a deep breath. When I left home for my first long work trip, I cried too. I stared at him. I genuinely thought I had misheard. You cried? He smiled awkwardly. Yes. I could not imagine it. Daniel was calm, steady, reliable. The idea of him crying seemed impossible. He laughed softly. That is exactly the reaction I expected. I wiped my eyes. What happened? He looked out the window. I was 17. His voice became quieter. It was the first time I had ever been away from home for more than a few days. I listened carefully. The first night I felt completely alone. He paused. I missed my family. Another pause. I missed familiar sounds. Then another. I missed knowing exactly where I belonged. My heart softened, because I understood, completely. Daniel turned toward me. I cried so hard I thought something must be wrong with me. A small laugh escaped both of us. Then he continued. The next morning an older Amish man told me something I never forgot. I waited. He said homesickness is proof that you have been loved. The room fell silent. I felt those words settle deeply inside me. Homesickness is proof that you have been loved. Suddenly my tears looked different. Not like weakness, not like failure, not like regret. They were evidence of something beautiful. Evidence that my parents had loved me well. Evidence that my family mattered. Evidence that home had been worth missing. The realization changed something inside me. Not instantly, but enough. The ache remained, yet the shame began disappearing. Near midnight, Daniel lit a small lamp. The soft glow filled the room. Then he reached into a drawer. What are you doing? He smiled. Preparing for tomorrow. From the drawer he removed several folded pieces of paper. I frowned. What are those? Letters. My confusion grew. Letters from who? My mother. I stared at him. He laughed. She wrote them years ago. I still did not understand. Seeing my expression, he explained. My mother believed every newly married couple would face difficult days. I nodded slowly. That seems true. He handed me one of the folded pages. She wrote advice for different situations. I opened it carefully. The handwriting was beautiful. At the top were simple words. For the days you miss home. My eyes widened. Daniel smiled. She wrote dozens. I looked at him in disbelief. Dozens? She planned for everything. A laugh escaped me. For the first time all evening, it felt genuine. Then I began reading. The letter spoke about marriage, about leaving home, about creating new traditions, about carrying old memories while building new ones. Each sentence felt as though it had been written specifically for me. By the time I reached the end, fresh tears filled my eyes. But these tears felt different, softer, warmer, hopeful. Daniel watched quietly. Then he said something that would remain with me for the rest of my life. You do not have to stop loving your old home to love your new one. I looked at him. Those words felt like an answer to every fear I had carried. Perhaps marriage was not replacing one life with another. Perhaps it was joining them, carrying the best parts forward, keeping what mattered, building something new without forgetting what came before. For the first time since the wedding ended, I felt my heart become lighter, not healed completely, but lighter. I thought the hardest part of my tears was behind me. I was wrong, because the next morning an elderly Amish woman would tell me the real meaning behind the old rule about brides who cry on their wedding night, and her words would reveal a family secret that no one had expected me to hear. The next morning I woke before sunrise. For a moment I forgot where I was. Then I saw the unfamiliar room, the unfamiliar furniture, the unfamiliar curtains, and reality returned. I was married. I was no longer living in my parents' home. A small ache returned to my chest. But it was not as sharp as the night before. Daniel was already awake. He smiled when he saw me. How are you feeling? I thought carefully. Tired. That made him laugh. Then I added, better. And for the first time since the wedding, I truly meant it. After breakfast, family members began stopping by. That was normal in our community. Relatives wanted to congratulate the newly married couple. Some brought baked goods. Others brought small gifts. Everyone seemed happy. Everyone seemed excited. I smiled and thanked them, but I was still emotionally exhausted. Late that morning, Daniel's grandmother arrived. Her name was Miriam. She was 81 years old, small, gentle, sharp-minded. People often said she remembered details better than people half her age. After greeting everyone, she asked if she could speak with me privately. I followed her outside. We sat beneath a large maple tree. The morning breeze moved through the branches above us. For a few moments, she simply watched me. Then she smiled. "You cried last night." My face immediately turned red. I looked down. News traveled quickly in Amish families, apparently faster than I realized. I did. She nodded. "There is nothing wrong with that." I felt relieved hearing those words. Then she surprised me. "Do you know where the old rule came from?" I blinked. "The rule about brides crying?" "Yes." I shook my head. "No." She folded her hands. "Most young people do not." I listened carefully. For years, I had heard older women mention the rule, but nobody had ever explained it. Miriam looked toward the fields. Then she began speaking. "Long ago, many people misunderstood bridal tears." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "They assumed tears meant regret." I nodded. That was exactly what many people seemed to believe. She smiled, but the older women understood something different. I leaned forward. "What?" Miriam's eyes softened. They believed tears often meant the bride understood the value of what she was leaving behind. The words immediately touched my heart, because that was exactly how I had felt. Not regret, not doubt. Love. Love for my family. Love for my childhood. Love for a chapter of life that had ended. Miriam continued. "The rule was never really about crying." I listened closely. It was about the reason for the tears. The breeze moved gently around us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said something unexpected. "My daughter cried harder than any bride I ever saw." I looked at her. "You had a daughter?" Her smile faded slightly. "Yes." I noticed a sadness in her eyes. The kind of sadness that never completely leaves a person. "What happened?" For several seconds, she remained silent. Then she answered, "She died many years ago." My heart sank. "I am sorry." She nodded gently. "Thank you." We sat quietly. Then she continued her story. On her wedding night, she cried for hours. I immediately thought of myself. "Really?" Miriam laughed softly. "Oh yes. What was wrong?" "Nothing." Her answer surprised me. She looked at me carefully. "That is the point." I waited. Everyone assumed something was wrong. A small smile appeared. But she simply loved her family deeply. The words reminded me of Daniel's statement from the night before. "Homesickness is proof that you have been loved." Miriam nodded as though reading my thoughts. "Exactly." Then her expression became serious. "My daughter taught me something." I listened carefully. "What was it?" She smiled sadly. "That we should never rush people through grief." The sentence hit me hard, because that was exactly what I had been trying to do. I had spent the entire wedding day fighting my emotions, trying not to cry, trying not to appear weak, trying not to disappoint anyone, trying not to ruin the happiness of the occasion. But maybe I never needed to fight those feelings. Maybe I simply needed to experience them. Miriam reached for my hand. When something precious ends, healthy people grieve. I felt tears forming again. Not painful tears, thoughtful tears. Even when something beautiful begins. I nodded. Slowly, deeply, understanding at last. The end of one chapter and the beginning of another had happened on the same day. No wonder my heart felt overwhelmed. That afternoon, after Miriam left, I found myself thinking about everything she had said. I thought about my father, my mother, my childhood home, the kitchen where we shared meals, the porch where I watched summer sunsets, the barn where I helped with chores, the countless ordinary moments that had shaped me. Then I thought about Daniel, our future, the family we hoped to build, the home we would create together. And suddenly something became clear. I was not standing between two lives. I was carrying one into another. Nothing good had been lost. It had simply changed form. That evening, Daniel and I sat outside watching the sunset. The sky glowed orange and gold. The fields stretched endlessly before us. Peace settled over the farm. After a while, Daniel asked quietly, "Do you miss home?" I smiled. "Yes." He nodded. "I think I always will." That answer surprised him. Then I continued, "But I think that is all right." A smile appeared on his face. I leaned my head against his shoulder. For the first time since the wedding, I felt calm. Not because I no longer missed my family, because I understood that missing them did not mean I loved my husband any less. Love was not a limited thing. The heart could hold both, the old home and the new one. Years later, when young Amish brides asked me about marriage, I often shared the same lesson. Many of them worried about crying. Many felt embarrassed. Many thought their tears meant they were not ready. I always told them the truth. Sometimes wedding night tears are not a sign of fear. Sometimes they are not a sign of regret. Sometimes they are simply proof that a young woman was blessed with a family worth missing. And if those tears come from love, there is nothing shameful about them. In fact, they may be one of the most beautiful gifts a bride can carry into her marriage. Because a woman who knows how to love her family deeply often knows how to love her future family deeply too. That was the real meaning behind the old Amish rule. Not that brides should cry, but that tears deserve understanding before judgment. And on the night I could not stop crying, I learned that some tears are not signs of weakness at all. They are signs of a heart that has been loved well.